I think we should just go straight ahead to the first one, Jonas Ström, who is the CEO of investment bank ABG Sundal Collier, and who has some thoughts about how to make the industry more gender diverse. Welcome up to the stage, and please give him applause for doing it despite of his recent working from television. I've learned one thing. If you're in the picture, everybody will look at you and think about something that stands out. Yeah, exactly. And obviously so you have to explain it.
This is a gimmick, actually. Nothing happened.
You just want people to feel sorry for you.
Exactly. Okay. No, really, I had an operation. But let's not dwell on that. I wasn't able to make as fancy entrance as Anders, unfortunately, or fortunately, perhaps. But first of all, I'm really honored having been invited here today. Thank you so much for extending the invitation here today. My name is Jonas Ström, and I will talk a bit about the unequal gender representation in the financial industry, or more specifically within investment banking, and why I think this needs to change and why it needs to change urgently. I've been working in the financial industry for, 2 decades and some change, and I still remember clearly one of my first impressions from starting in the industry back in the late 90s, and that was, hey, where did all the women go? Because you see, back at my university, there were at least as many women as men studying for a degree. Might be a bit less than 50% within financial economics, but still not the underrepresentation we see in the industry as a whole. And across universities today in Sweden, we can see that, I mean, women, they perform at least as good as men. On average, better, to be honest. We know that. That is statistics. But still, why did so few of my female university peers join the industry? And perhaps even more important, why do we still struggle with this unequal gender representation 20 years later, in the 21st century? Come on. And during the course of my career, I've often wondered why this is the case. Especially so, I might be a bit tainted here, but especially so, since this is an immensely exciting industry to be part of. It is, honestly. To be part of facilitating defining moments in businesses growing, adapting and transforming, allocating capital to new business solutions that drives our society forward, creating jobs. And, okay, I might be vain, be part of a few of the biggest financial transactions in the Nordics as well. I wish for everyone to have that opportunity. But still, when it comes to gender representation, we are definitely not best in class. I would say the opposite. When the industry was booming in the 90s, we obviously failed to attract and retain women talent in our industry, and this poor track record, as I alluded to earlier, has continued. And as a consequence, when I look around at leading positions, I find very few female role models. That is obviously one of the contributing factors to this vicious circle, lack of female role models. But there must be other answers to the big question why the industry as a whole has failed. And I think one important thing is workplace culture. I think it's imperative. Having worked in this industry for, as I said, more than 20 years, I am unfortunately well aware of, let's say, how a damaging workplace culture can intimidate rather than attract new talent, not least new female talent. I know how a macho culture can shape a workplace into something, let's say, very unattractive. How the language that's being used and the attitudes that sometimes indirectly are accepted and tolerated can poison a workplace. I know, I've seen it myself too many times. So I don't believe it's any quick fixes there, but it comes from within the answer to the solution of this problem. We need to change the attitudes, and it has to start with people like me. So, why is this issue so important for ABG? I mean, we are in the big scheme of things, small independent investment bank driven by one thing, making profits. So one could ask oneself, okay, this sounds good, it's a marketing gimmick. On the contrary, we sell one single thing in our industry, and that is the best possible advice to our clients. The best possible advice is based on many things. It's not only knowledge, reading loud from a textbook. It is based on multiple perspectives, providing the best possible advice. In this regard, we want to be the best in our field, and to do so, we need to attract the best employees available. But how can we do that if we only attract talent from 50% of the talent pool? I mean, we are an investment bank that are here to support businesses for tomorrow, and in doing so, we have a very strong incentive to stay relevant. And that is the big issue here. We're not going to stay relevant for our clients if our teams do not reflect society at large. We do not do that today. However, we don't have all the answers on exactly how to solve the issue with underrepresentation in women in our sector. And moreover, I personally think it's perhaps not me, a man in his mid-40s and some change, who can generate the best ideas on how to solve this. I am humble enough to realize we need input from the ones that are better equipped to come up with the solutions, and that is female peers, women. And I'm not the only one humble and realizing this. My company is as well. Therefore, we established a foundation back as late last year with the objective to give financial support to organizations that can promote and sustain equality for women in the financial sector. The goal of this foundation, more specifically, is to support and encourage young women to choose a career in the financial industry. We have to start somewhere, and that is where we can have an impact today. I would love to get more female role models, and I know Anna maybe have some insights or thoughts on that. But what we can contribute with today specifically is encouraging more women, young women, to seek themselves to this industry. And by doing so, we will also get more insights and deeper insights into the barriers that women face to pursuing careers in financial services. I've touched upon two important things, but there are more factors contributing to this. The foundation's capital consists of some 4 million ABG shares that will provide annual dividends that will actually provide this financial support to support the foundation's goals. We have a board of directors in this foundation, which we are very grateful to have recruited, such as Åsa Risberg, partner of EQT, Katrin Jansson, portfolio manager with Swedbank Robur, and not least Judy Bollinger, our former chairman in ABG. And she's been around in this industry since the early 1980s. My gosh, she knows what she talks about. What have we done specifically so far? Well, we have supported organizations such as Future Board, Women's Finance Day in Norway, Female Founders in Sweden. That is, let's say, a forum that supports and encourages female tech starts to reach their full potential. As stated previously, my belief is that culture is one important factor why we have failed, and that needs to be addressed. And that's why I'm here today, obviously. But our early investigations also suggest that young women simply do not know what it means being part of this industry. I guess it has to do with perception, culture, lack of female role models, but once we get the opportunity to actually interact with young female talent at universities, we get a lot of traction, and we've seen that in our incoming applications for not only internships but full-time jobs as well. So that it's a trend that is heading the right way. Actually, we had, I'm a bit proud of this. We had Uppsala Ekonomerna, Women Careers Day, visiting us earlier this week, Monday. And the day after, we got this nice little letter stating their appreciation for our involvement in getting more female young talent being interested in the industry. It's a small step, it's a baby step, but it's actually happening. Okay. I can't escape from my responsibility, which is change of culture. And that is something that must happen from within. It starts with me, it starts with us, and it's our responsibility to make it happen. We need to future-proof the financial industry because we simply cannot miss out on talent. We have just gotten started. There's a lot of work to be done, but we will get there because we have to. Okay? With that, questions or maybe, well, I'll leave it to you, Alexander.
Yeah, and I would like to welcome Anna Stenberg, whom you mentioned earlier. Anna Stenberg, who now is, an angel investor in tech companies and things like that, but maybe mostly famous for starting a company called WES, a recruitment headhunting firm with a theme of inclusive recruitment. Mm-hmm. And Anna, when you hear Jonas say it's about culture, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I totally agree. Should we sit, or do you want us to stand here? What's easier for you?
I'm all for sitting down.
I'm just thinking about his leg here.
I'm all ears.
Let's sit down.
A little bit like that.
Let's sit down here. That's a good idea.
Yeah, please. Oh, thanks.
So.
Yeah. Why do you think they don't get enough people enough women getting into the business?
I mean, first of all, I totally agree with you. It starts with you guys, the leaders of the companies in the industry. It's all about the culture. It's all about the DNA of the companies. And it's the most important thing is that you kind of have to realize that it's the issue is not with the women. The issue is with the companies themselves. And that's why I also think it's extremely important to kind of kill some of the myths currently out there. And I think there were about 5-6 things that you mentioned that I don't 100% agree with. And I see that kind of argumentation with a lot of among a lot of kind of your peers and your competitors as well in the industry. I think first of all, we always talk about the fact that we need more female role models. That it's the female role models that are lacking. And of course we need more female role models. Absolutely. We need the young female talents to see more women in the top positions within the industry. But what I think is much more important is more male role models. Male role models who are actually driving this change, because today there are mainly, the male leaders who actually has the power and the influence and kind of the money to drive the change. So I want us to talk much more about the male role models. Who are they in this industry driving this change? And then you also mentioned that maybe it's your female peers that have the best ideas on how to solve this issue. And I think that's wrong. I think we all, men as women, have to do this change together. I have myself been on several boards as the only woman, and as soon as the diversity issue is brought up in the room, everyone looks at me like, Anna, I'm sure you have the answers. So maybe you can be on that panel, and they are going to write this article about diversity. Do you want to, be interviewed and so on? So we always tend to look at the women having to solve this matter, and I think that's totally wrong. I think we do have to do it together. And the third thing is that we always say that we have to be much better at attracting the female talents to the industry. They don't know what the industry is really about, and they don't really understand, how fun we have and how great this is. But I think they are very well aware of what this industry is about. They are just not interested because there's. No, but to be honest, and I mean, I'm sure the industry, I know it myself, I love it, it's great. I mean, what you get the possibility to work with, but they are not interested in having a career in a company where the culture is not inclusive, as you say, because there are so many other great options for them. And the other options are more diverse, inclusive, and fun companies to work in, where they actually see a potential for them reaching the top levels in the organization. And when they enter your website and they see a management team or a board where everyone is like clones of each other, they feel like, okay, I really need to look like that and be like that in order to have a future within this company. And that's why they proactively reject these companies. So we have to really understand that, okay, the problem is here with us and we have to change. We have to become the role models. And the only key issue is our culture. It has to start there. Then we can try to attract the women. But before we have something great to offer, there is no point doing it. So
Anna, you're saying we both need female role models just being there looking at the women they are on pictures of the websites, and we need male role models. But then I wonder, what should the male role models do? How are you a good male role model in this respect?
Well, first of all, you need knowledge. You need to understand. I think it's so great what you're saying, because you have understood this. You have really understood that it's about the leadership, it's about the company culture. And that's, I think, the best and most important step, that top management really understand that this is, a matter of survival. Because without, your ability to attract 100% of the competence pool, you will kind of lose the game. And that realization, I think, is extremely important. So knowledge, you have to understand, what are the myths that we are always kind of confirming out there, and why is diversity so important? And when the management team have realized that, they have to inject that knowledge into the organization as well. Because like we talked before, the seminar started about middle management, like how can we get the recruiting managers to understand and not be the bottlenecks in recruitment processes and changing the DNA and so on. But in order for them to change, you have to set those really, really pragmatic KPIs as well. And they have to understand that you are actually evaluating their performance when it comes to diversity. Because if you do that, and if they understand that you're actually evaluating them and that this is an important strategical, critical factor for the company, then they will change their behavior as well. But knowledge is key because they also have to understand why is it important. So it's not that hard.
You got some
knowledge
feedback
and
there,
KPIs.
Jonas. Thoughts about that?
Well, okay, I really appreciate the input, and obviously I haven't got this 100% right from your perspective, Anna, but I think I fully agree with everything you say as well. And one thing that we are thinking a lot about is it doesn't matter what we state in a PowerPoint slide, bullets on this is important. It actually boils down to one thing, and that is how do we get middle management to act the way we want to? And that has to do with one thing: people do what they are incentivized to do. They don't do what I tell them to do. They do what they are incentivized to do. And an organization as a whole, an organization doesn't work in a specific direction based on PowerPoints as well. An organization works based on KPIs and how we in management act.
And what should those KPIs be? What should specifically
could be simple,
middle management
very
do?
simple portion of female recruitments. Tick the box, yes or no, percentage-wise. Could be a part of variable compensation, for instance. Very simple.
Anna, do you have any ideas?
I think that's
a very concrete measure.
Yeah, I think that's a concrete measure. A lot of companies use that measure, and absolutely it's one good one to use, but it's not so long term. I think one other key measure that is good to use as well is to also look at the turnover. So where do we have the turnover? Usually when the higher up you come in the hierarchy, you see that the turnover among the female talents increase. So why is that? In which areas of the organization do we have the highest turnover of female talents and female leaders in general? And then you can start identify kind of the problems and the patterns in the organization, and also which leaders in the organization maybe aren't, able to lead diverse teams. Because that's also an important thing. I mean, leading a diverse organization puts completely different requirements onto the leaders themselves. I mean, leading, a group of clones where everyone has the same background, experience, perspective, they just confirm each other. You can lead everyone like this because you know that everyone is going to move in the same direction. It's much easier than leading a very diverse team with people with different backgrounds, cultures, experiences, and so on. So how do we kind of build our leaders in a way to become great leaders when it comes to leading diverse teams? And I think that is one of your key challenges. Like, what kind of capabilities do we see in our leaders today, and how can they become attractive leaders for the talents on the market?
Let's say that now I know you're not in the recruitment business anymore, but let's say you were, and Jonas, you are still engaged in this. Okay, good. Wes, then,
Yes.
But say Jonas comes to you and says, okay, I need help to find these leaders in the middle management that I want to promote, that have the eye, have the personality, or whatever is the magic sauce that is needed to make this work. What advice would you give him for what kind of people to look for to promote?
I think first of all you have to think about, okay, what kind of culture are we aiming for? You want to change your culture, you want to make it more inclusive and more attractive. So kind of identify that first, and then based on that see, okay, what kind of values, what kind of drivers and skills are kind of connected to building that culture? What is matching? And when you have identified that, then you can see, okay, this is the leadership profile we need in order to have an inclusive and attractive company culture. So first you have to identify kind of the vision of the culture, and then identify kind of the leadership skills.
Okay, and you were touching upon this cultural, the importance of culture. Could you be more specific? What would be an example of a bad culture?
Well, I guess to some extent we have experienced this in a very public way, given the Me Too force back in autumn 2017, which is. It was surprising to me to see that the financial industry was included so late in that process, to be honest. But that is one example, and it also, I mean, given that the industry as a whole is driven by basically making profits and KPIs tailor-made to making short-term profits. It's a culture of making these short-term profits rather than thinking about where do we want to go long-term, what do we need to do to be relevant to our clients long-term, and that's a conflict for an entity such as ABG, the short-term perspective versus the long-term perspective. But you end up in a point where you actually have to decide what is most important. We have ended up in that point. So we will make change now, but it takes time.
Yeah, but I also think we always talk about that it takes time, and it really doesn't have to, because especially not in a business that is driven by pragmatic numbers, because you can use that as an ammunition here and really like an engine to drive this change. Because if you just set the KPIs, and if you have received know-how on which KPIs to actually measure against, then your organization will start changing quite quickly. And if you compare that to an NGO or a political organization that are not as pragmatic, it will take much longer for them to change. So I think you have a benefit here.
What will take time is obviously the fact that we are, I mean, to be proactive on the question about our gender equality, it's just south of 20%, which is one of the reasons why I'm here today, obviously. But it will take time to get that balance fixed.
Depends on how brave you are.
Yeah, depends on how brave. Okay, Tove, please.
I don't think it takes time at all. This industry is all about money. If you put the money there, every single one of your guys will run that way. And if you put the KPIs that they should have 50% female in their teams, within a year you will have it. So it takes time. It will not take time. This is the easiest industry in the world to put KPIs on.
I totally agree.
Okay.
I totally agree.
You got a sneak preview of one of our forthcoming panelists, Tove Bongstad, head of Nordic at Amundi. Thanks.
Clear and loud. Well, we have KPIs such as 50% recruitment, but the problem is we can't force. We have those KPIs. We do.
I think the two reasons why you don't succeed, even though you have started using the KPIs, I mean, what we see when we recruit partners and directors and so on to your industry is that the role description is the most narrow thing I have ever seen.
True.
So I think you have to open up your perspective and see, okay, in order to succeed in this role, what are the key competences and key experience to really, really succeed? If you try to open up and not say, okay, you have to go to this school or that school, and you have to have, experience from playing on that golf course, and you have to, if you haven't worked at JP Morgan or have an education from Harvard, you are not even interesting to look at. I mean, I've never seen that narrow role descriptions in my whole life anywhere. And in the companies in your business where you have actually broadened the role descriptions, they have succeeded, and they have also been more successful when it comes to finding great people. So you have to be more brave there.
Yeah, and I think diversity is also inclusive from different backgrounds, not only women actually. So it's a big change of culture that needs, and I fully agree. We are working hard. I don't fully agree it's fixed within 1 year, but we are doing our almost best.
Yeah.
But yes, could you explain what is the conflict between the short-term goals and the long-term goals?
The short-term
here?
goals is that people are being evaluated on this year's profit as in an industry as a whole. I'm talking about the industry as a whole, this year's profit is more important than what's 5 years down the road. That is a problem, that people needs to think longer term rather than short term.
And why would that be hindering achieving some sort of gender balance?
Because it takes longer time to recruit an equal gender representation. Simple answer.
But
it
I
takes
think-
more effort. It takes longer time since the pool is
to
smaller.
differ.
I've been there.
But I think it's also about making those a bit uncomfortable decisions.
Yeah.
Because I think you know that there are leaders in your organizations that maybe aren't the best leaders leading the teams in general and leading diverse teams. And it hurts sometimes to actually replace them for others that are more suitable.
Yep.
And you have to be brave. You have to make those uncomfortable decisions. And it's easier to make those uncomfortable decisions if you know that there are more money down the line. So that is the kind of incentive that also Tove is talking about. And it will be so much more easy for your middle management to make those uncomfortable decisions that are the right decisions if they know that there is money down the line. And I agree with you. It's not about... it's about understanding that it will be both, short-term profitable and long-term more profitable to make these decisions. And it's not about getting rid of all the men and replacing them with women. It's more about really broadening up and being more brave, I would say.
Okay, more.
Can I add something to that? Can I just comment on that?
Yes, please. I was just
on Anna's comments. Yeah, exactly. But I also worked with getting more balance between men and women in previous organizations I work with. And there I really found that you have to actually proactively move men away in order to make room for the women, because it's not enough in the areas where you know you will have this typical imbalance, because normally these men often have a very long tenure, and of course that hurts, and sometimes it can feel unfair, but if you don't make those proactive decisions and actually move men away, then you will never be able to reach any balance in any reasonable time frame. That's at least my experience.
You've done that?
I've done that, yeah.
Okay, maybe you will tell us more about it later when you're up on the panel. Great.
And I mean, I agree with Anna completely. And this argumentation is not about quotation or reducing kind of the requirements on the competence level, because that is usually also a myth, that you have to, let's tumma på the competence requirements. It's never ever about that. It's just about becoming much more creative and innovative when it comes to which competences we should actually look for in order to become more high-performing as an organization.
But Anna, if you remove a man to make place for a woman, in what way is that not quotation?
Well, you should only do that if you know that this man is not the 100% match for the position. So if you know that there is someone else, man or women, out there that is better skilled for this role, then you should make that change. But it's never about only looking at the female candidates. You should, of course, also include male candidates into that mix. But if you have this much more open perspective on which competences that will actually make our organization more competitive and high-performing, there will definitely be more women on those shortlists.
Breaking the status quo seems to be
absolutely. It's about breaking the norms.
Okay. And before moving on to the next speaker, I wonder if we will already have some spontaneous questions. If somebody else would like to, please go ahead. You could say your name first.
Hi, my name is Ingin. I used to went to Handels, I just want to comment. I think the definition of what is a good candidate in financial industry is very, very narrow. It's like you have a very standard sort of like SOP how you evaluate a candidate, and I totally agree with Anna. I think that's SOP need to be more creative. It's probably very hard for financial industry to actually change overnight, but then that's like the way that can direct sort of like the talent pool, because if you think about it, like how many people, how many girls there are study business today or study finance in entire Sweden? A lot of them. But why didn't they end up getting into, for example, this investment bank? Is because this investment bank only care about candidates from Handels. But so if we turn the table around, we actually open up for other opportunities and other options, then we will actually realize there are so many talented women out there.
I fully agree. We recruit more people from not Handels. Just one comment. No offense.
Any other question? Please, go ahead. Hey, just press the button there. You were on your way. Great.
Thank you. Hi. I want to ask a very practical question. For example, the big difference between women and men is many women would have children, and there's some evidence from academics that a huge reason between the gender pay gap is due to the interruption because women have children. And the second factor is their husband's wage. So yeah, so I just want to ask the first one. Well, in the investment banking industry or in some challenging or demanding industries, what do you think you can do to face this fact that women would probably interrupt?
Well, I can tell you what we do short term. We don't have that many women, as stated.
There's not much of a problem.
So, but there's not a problem. No. But what we do is we encourage about male role models. We encourage parental leave, regardless of gender, big way, and we are very generous and getting more generous when it comes to leveling out what you actually lose out short term by not being working anymore in terms of bonuses, etc., etc. So that is what we actually can do ourselves, and we also make sure we map, and we do that on a yearly basis internally in our organization, any differences in not only fixed compensation salaries but also total compensation. And we do not accept any sort of differences based on gender. That is absolutely not acceptable.
That's
so
great.
that's what we
really
do.
good.
That's what we do.
That's really
Could
good.
one KPI be to measure the amount, how many women, how long they are at home with their kids?
I don't have that number in front of me.
No, but I mean,
it could be one. Maybe we have it. I have to confess.
But I think what you're doing here is really a competitive advantage that can really become a competitive advantage for you in the industry, because there are very few companies that do measure and that do have an ambition when it comes to the salary gaps. So I think that there are golden opportunities for a company within this industry that really wants to kind of move the needle. And we saw it so clearly. If you look at the telecom industry, Tele2 and their former Swedish CEO, Thomas Ekman, he decided that, I want to change. We are so behind, and we really want to move and become and position ourselves in this industry as the diverse, vibrant company culture that we want to be. And it took him like 1.5 years. And then he had female leaders in, CTO positions, as well as business driving divisions, and a completely diverse management team. And that competitive advantage that he got from an employer branding perspective, was amazing. And that just become a positive snowball effect. And I met him on panels like this every week. And I'm like, are you here again? And no one has really taken that position within your industry. So that's a huge potential. Really?
Golden opportunity.
It's not a difficult crowd to beat, I guess. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, the competition is quite weak right
Competition
now.
is very weak.
So.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Anna Stenberg and Jonas
Thank you.
Ström, for your